This episode of The Benefit Whisper is brought to you by Route 3 Insurance and Financial Services, where smarter benefits begin. If you're tired of rising healthcare costs and opaque insurance contracts, Route 3 is here to help you take control. They specialize in transparent, employer-driven benefit strategies that protect your people and your bottom line. Ready to break away from the status quo? Visit www.fixmybenefitsnow.com and discover how Route 3 can help you build a plan that actually works for your team and for your budget. Welcome back to the Benefit Whisper. I'm your host, Ralph Weber. Today, we're getting into one of the most opaque corners of healthcare, which is pharmacy benefits, or PBMs. Joining me today is somebody who has made it her mission to pull back the curtain, Rachel Strauss, better known as the PBM Princess. She spent more than 20 years in pharmacy benefits and health plan strategies, and she was part of the early team at EHIM. And now she runs her own firm, helping employers, brokers, and TPAs decode PBM contracts, rebates, and pricing structures. Rachel, it is great to have you here. How
Thank you
are
so
you?
much, Ralph, for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. We've talked a lot about PBMs in the past. I had Chris Deacon on. I've had Julie Slesnick, Benjamin Jolly. PBMs is, of course, a huge part, and as it becomes a bigger and bigger part of the total healthcare spending, it becomes more and more important. So I am glad that you're here today to join us. So let's start with contract landmines. You talk a lot about, and of course, when I spoke to Chris Deacon, she really got into the contracting part, hugely important. You talk a lot about contract literacy, not just slogans like transparency or pass through. What are, let's say, 3 definitions in a PBM contract that often cost employers the most in practice? And how should they be rewritten to avoid that bleed?
This is a great way to start. And I think that, as you talk about contract literacy and we talk about PBMs in general, you know, unfortunately, we live in a time where PBM contracts are as long as a mortgage document, right? And it's sign here, initial here, there's all these things. And during the sales process, the PBMs used, Ralph, those exact buzzwords, pass through, transparent, we only make
Right.
our money this way. And what, so many employers aren't realizing is that those definitions can change,
Mhm.
and so the landmines and the things that really need to be clear and concise are first and foremost, definitions on as simple as how they are defining a brand medication, a generic medication, a specialty medication, and making sure that the discounts that go with those, even in a pass through contract, are consistent. Because
Right.
what we see so often is that there's a lot of borrowing of language that goes through in an audit, right? Where,
Right.
you look at the average discount, that has been seen. And I know, Ralph, you've had some, people I have tremendous, you know, um, excuse me, I have tremendous respect for in this industry. And that all they do is audit, right? So it's you would think it's easy to look at a discount, look at the price and say, found one that doesn't match. Well,
Right.
then the contract isn't written correctly, the PBM can come back and say, well, we didn't technically define that drug as that category that you're matching up the discount.
Right.
So where somebody like, an Ann Lewandowski who can immediately find something, if that contract wasn't set up correct to begin with, she may not have a leg to stand on for the employer.
Right.
That's, the first area is just making sure definitions are consistent throughout the document and that, everything is lining up.
Yeah.
The second, area, and again, these questions were giving me in advance for listeners. So my brain is putting together the 3 I want to talk about.
Right. Okay.
The second area I would say that can also be a landmine is how rebates are defined. Rebates is, we could do our own 60-minute show on and of 5 episodes because rebates themselves, Ralph, are truly a landmine because even in a pass-through transparent world where the PBM is making the statement that they're giving 100% of those rebates back to the client, the question becomes, what are the audit rights on those
Mhm.
very rebates? Number 2, how long is the PBM keeping those rebates on hand for? Because again, there's money that can be earned off of those rebates from a
Sure.
from an interest standpoint, depending on the size of the group. And if the PBM is holding on to rebates for 6 to 12 months before they start going back to the employer, well, then there's enough float to get through other things that could match. So the rebate
Right.
section in general is something that an employer really wants to make sure they have a handle on, as well as what their audit rights are after that contract. And I also like to go as far as I believe the PBM needs to name who the rebate aggregator is. A
Right.
lot of companies don't realize if you're an employer getting 100% of rebates, the question is what is the PBM paying the entity to get those rebates for you?
Okay.
So if you're following me, the PBM itself maybe is taking a bucket of money and passing it through. But what the employer is not seeing is what that top level contract is with that rebate aggregator. And why, Ralph, this is so important that an employer knows this is because if the PBM has any vested interest in that aggregator giving the 100% pass through, you're not really 100% pass through. You're paying an outside
Yeah.
entity that has shared ownership. So it's really become a game. And the third and final piece I like to see in my contracts is some form of a guarantee, something that backs it to the proposal and dollar risk. I like to see my clients have something to go back on. If the very reason they're going with that PBM does not happen, then I like to see some dollars at risk put in the contract.
So by guaranteed, do you mean like a PMPM guarantee or
Or
what kind?
or a performance guarantee, right? I
Okay.
like to see if dollars go above and beyond. And by the way, there are risk strategies that are out there
Mhm.
that can accommodate this from a reinsurance standpoint for the PBM. But I do like to see PBMs have skin in the game because we're getting to a place where those discounts were dazzling on paper, but the spend is continuing to go up. Even with the
Right.
largest names in the country,
Yeah.
something isn't adding up.
Yeah. No, no, definitely not. And discounts, discount from what? There's the MAC, the AWP, there's so many different starting points, just like, in healthcare, the charge master price can be anything you want. Years ago, I was doing a bid on a contract in Tennessee. It was a county health plan. They had about 5,000 employees, 8,000 members. And the specs on the RFP said we're going to award it to there was a big weighting put to the average discounts. So I said, okay. I went to a local hospital and I said, do you do any direct contracts? And they said, yeah, yeah, we do. And I said, if I had, a group with 8,000 members, what kind, excuse me, what kind of discount could I get? And they said, well, what do you want? I said, well, what's kind of the Cigna Blue Cross, average? What is the Cigna Blue Cross average? And they said, 49, 50% ish. I said, okay. And they said, how much do you want? I just threw it out there. I said, how about 75%? And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. I said, wait, I've got this. I've got this RFP now. They said, but just wait a second. Normally our charge master is 400% of Medicare. We're going to have to do 800% of Medicare to give you 75%. So it was a moving target. So that taught me a lot. And it really brought it home that you shouldn't focus on the discount. What is the base price instead of what is the discount? Just like the old department store marking things up just before Black Friday so that they can have a bigger sale. It's a shell game. So now, Rachel, when you say audit rights, should it be in black and white in the terms of
Yes.
the agreement?
It should be in black and white. It should be written timeline, how quickly data has to be given. I'm okay with the PBM wanting it to be a mutually agreed upon auditor. They should know who's getting data
Right.
to an extent. We're living in a world where what is proprietary, what is not, right?
Yeah.
I had a very successful career at a PBM for 2 decades, and it's because we did the right thing, but we also were profitable, right? I mean, you have to be able to make money.
Sure.
And so it's at what extent and what is secret sauce for a PBM, what isn't. I don't know, you know, how to state that other than when you're honest and you charge
Yeah.
one fee, there shouldn't be any secret sauce in your claims. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're getting to. But at the same time, I think it just depends on how the employer is structured, the size of the group, and what's going to be done with that data. But you're right. What we're unable to get to in the PBM space without ease is that actual cost. And I think
Mhm,
the retail examples are great because everybody understands. I kid my nickname, PBM Princess. I literally named my company PBM Princess. And I do a lot of shopping analogies because math is math, right? You can't argue that. And you can manipulate it. And my shopping manipulation is always I can tell my husband I got 30% off of something,
mhm,
but he's always going to say, well, where did the product come from? Because
right.
30%, as we know, at a Nordstrom's or a Neiman Marcus is very different than 10% off at Target.
Yeah,
Because at net, if I got a discount that's lower, but I went to Target, I'm going
right.
to have, in all reasonable terms, a lower costing item to begin with. And that is what we're trying to get to.
Yeah,
But with your example and the store marking something up and, playing a game, in consumer goods, we are the people spending our money. I know what I have in my bank account. I know what I choose to buy. If I want to buy this mug and I see it's $7 or it's $11 or whatever, I am making a choice. This is what I paid for this mug. With prescriptions, it's a little bit different
yeah,
because every PBM has a different methodology of figuring out what that same drug costs. Some have different incentives and some are giving them back. And so what's really hard in our, marketplace today is what should be advertising the pricing, right? Our mutual friend, Ralph Ron Harrison, I'll give Mark Cuban a plug. He has a product. It is called Cost Plus. You can look on his website. They publish there's no NDA. They will just tell you the price of the drug. This is the
right.
price.
Yeah,
You can shop it. I am pretty confident that most drugs in his space are pretty much the lowest you can get. There's a few that, maybe a different pharmacy, but that's what it should be. It should be a consumer looking across the board. Ralph, in today's world, the consumer in this agreement, the consumer in this circumstance is the employer.
right.
And the employer is not given that ability to see, oh, this pharmacy or that pharmacy. It's like this PBM is getting this average discount, this, that, but their rebate's higher. And all of a sudden, you just don't have a level playing field. And that is
Yeah,
why, to me, it is so important to try to get some accountability, right? And ownership on this spend. And in the audit rights, it at least shows, if the only thing the PBM is contractually obligated to is discounts and
mhm,
rebate guarantees, those can both be met in accordance with the contract, and you can still have a way higher bill next year.
wow. Yeah. No, that makes total sense, Rachel. Speaking of audit rights, I had a client years ago. I looked in their ASA and it talked about the audit rights, and it said, "You, as the employer, have no right to contact the providers and say how much they billed and how much they got. And you have no right to ask your employees, and if you want to audit this, you have to do it through us exclusively." It was egregious. It was, yes, it had audit rights, but they were not fair. They were not reasonable. So, hugely important. So, I'm sorry, did you want to respond to that
Yeah,
or?
I do. I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if you're going
Yeah.
into another question. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, the
Yeah, I'm
exact
about
same thing.
to.
And, I think that it's absurd. It is absolutely absurd. I mean, I actually made a joke. Another colleague of ours, Kim Carlson, I'm sure you've known her and, the work that she's doing. I made a joke yesterday with her that I said, I wish, these rules could apply with my house. Here's my shopping analogy with my household credit card bills. I wish that like I could tell my husband, no, you can't see the itemized bill that we both mutually pay for
Right.
because it doesn't have anything to do with you, what I spent my money on. And it's like, no, he should get to look. And I think that it's all gets it back down to what did the client sign and understand that
Right.
they were or were not giving up.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, that's a great analogy also, Rachel. So, you talked about the 100% pass through, okay?
Yes.
And so some employers probably say, "Okay, I just want a pass through PBM. Once I've checked that box, I'm good." But you said that that can be a distraction, just that word. It's a nice buzzword, just like transparency is a nice
Yes.
so the net cost on a pass through or the rebate on a pass through, you touched on this a couple of minutes ago. Who is the aggregator and what is the net cost? So do different PBMs derive that net? You've already said yes, they do, but what are the methods that they get to that cost?
The net cost per drug or the cost of the 100% pass through rebate, just so I can understand the question.
Both, both.
Yeah.
Mostly the drug.
Yeah, I mean, every PBM has a different way they do it. And that's
Mhm.
kind of where things are getting so murky is
Right,
rebates are based on typically what I find in contracts. And I actually try to get my clients again to not take rebate guarantees because if you have a guarantee, that's where the games get played because they have to hit that number, right?
right. Yeah.
I almost challenge to figure out, how can we look at trend and look at the actual mix of claims and what generated the performance of the plan and where the incentives were. To answer your question, without it being a contract opinion, today most PBMs will define, the cost of a claim net whatever that average rebate is. So if it's a $500 drug, the average rebate is, let's say, $200. They'll say it was $100 total for that drug. But really, each drug has its own rebate and its own dollars accounted for it. And so, what I would way rather see is, and that reminds me, just because I'm trying to give sound bites here that employers can listen to as they're
Right.
listening to your podcast. Another area you never want to be lumped together is specialty rebate guarantees. And, you want to see how specialty rebates are broken out with
Mhm.
brand and biosimilar,
Yeah.
as those can be averaged and manipulated as well. Yes.
Right.
And
Interesting.
yes. And so when you are looking at, when you are doing a, net cost, you want to know if the PBM will also give you NDC rebate level detail. It's extremely helpful for stop loss carriers, especially in the specialty realm, to know what is the specific rebate on the specific drug, not a net average, because
Right.
that they're getting to that unit cost.
Yeah, it is so complicated, and it's a shell game. They use words that are meant to distract, not define, a lot of the times. So, what's the one metric that you would put on sort of their scorecard if they have 100% pass through so they don't overpay somewhere else?
I would want to know the prior authorization rates. I would want to know
Okay.
how often drugs are going through.
Mm,
I would
okay.
want to know book of business PEPM averages.
Mhm.
And I would see if you can get it industry specific because it is going to
Right.
matter what type of
Sure.
industry and what type of health plan. And I would want to see how the group is measuring up to their book of business. Understand even in 100% pass through way how how it goes between each bucket. And I would want to see, I would want to see what their generic utilization rate is, how it
Mhm.
stays. We're in a world where generic utilization should be close to 90%. And if we're more focused on rebates, that's where the rebates, can impact that generic utilization.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've also said that every PBM, every no that they say, and you just kind of discussed it in the prior authorization. So saying no is not necessarily a bad thing. Give me an example where a prior auth or a step therapy where the PBM actually that where the rule actually applied outcomes to the lowest cost plan spend. So, what should employers do to measure the fallout?
Sure. So that question is an interesting one just because I think that it's twofold. With prior authorization, you've got two things that you've got to make sure. You are 100% spot on, Ralph, with the lowest net cost. You also have to keep in mind the plan document and what the group wants to cover. So I don't know if you can guess where I'm getting into with prior authorization protocols and lowest net cost and plan document language is our GLP-1 class, right? It is not the most expensive class by drug, but it is the most popular and it is what is keeping up people at night in the self-funded world.
Right.
Because these drugs are anywhere between $900 and $1,400 a month before rebate. And it's an area where if you are not covering weight loss medications in your program, it needs to make sure that it is not going for weight loss. And so, first and foremost, the prior authorization protocols for a PBM are to make sure that we're administering what the plan document is supposed to say. Next, in our lowest net cost example, where a PBM can intervene, I have a great one that I've seen happen firsthand, which was an employer group that came, a PBM I worked for from another PBM. We saw a claim come through for one of the rheumatoid arthritis medications, and we saw the medication attempt to get filled. We put in the prior authorization process just to get documentation from the physician.
Mhm.
out the member wasn't even on that medication any longer. In fact, the pharmacy was just trying to auto refill. And it was a whole story where the member actually found that something lower costing and, could have worked in the first place. And had we not talked to the doctor, that script could have been filled and the member would have gotten a different bottle and thought the doctor switched her to begin with. So it's really to make sure right drug, right patient, right time.
Right.
Uh, Step therapy can get a bad rap, especially so many of the medications step therapy is on today are what's on TV. And that's the thing that
Yeah,
people see that they want
exactly.
read about it on TV, and I don't wanna try what was out before. In so many instances where drugs are just part 2 of something that's been out forever, there is some
Mhm.
work just as well. We're in a world where we're trying to keep healthcare accessible, affordable, something employers can continue to offer while keeping their doors open. And so there's gotta be something to give. We're not trying to keep people from being healthy, we're trying to make sure that it's all the right things are put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Benjamin Jolly, when I had him on a few months back, he talked about how adding a little bit of baking soda increased the price by $2,000. It's crazy. I posted this on LinkedIn just a few weeks ago. I was filling a medication for myself, and I'm on an HSA compatible HDHP plan. Okay. So I've already satisfied the deductible. I'm on the coinsurance part. Okay. 35% coinsurance. My cost was going to be around $80. So if one third is 80, then the whole thing is 240. So I looked at GoodRx, and with the GoodRx discount, it was $46 all in, the whole thing. So not only is it less than my part, but if it had been in January and I hadn't used my deductible, it would have been even a bigger spread.
Yes.
Yeah,
So what you're highlighting there is the variation of PBMs, and your high deductible health plan has built-in margin to make money on that script for themselves.
right.
'Cause my
Yeah.
guess is, I believe you are an independent employer, correct, Ralph?
Mhm. Yes.
Yes. And so you are not insured through a large company. You are purchasing health insurance for yourself or for your business. And you don't get the controls like our large employers who can dictate terms on their PBM contracts. So you're paying premium every month, right? And that's how it works. And you're upfront a cost and you can't even shop in that front window that you've been given. And, that is, what I'm hoping that Trump RX and, not to make this political, but it's what he called it. So that's what we're going to call it. It will bring more awareness. And look, Good RX is nothing more than a PBM bidding on the claim.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
what a lot of people don't realize, even in our industry, Ralph, people don't understand.
Mhm.
GoodRx is backed by a PBM.
Yeah.
They've just figured out where, they're making money on a per claim fee and they're getting paid to utilize their pricing. And they're
Right.
also making margin on the rebate. And so but what's unfortunate for you is you can't fill that GoodRx claim and get credit on your high deductible health plan because it's
Right. No,
not on that
exactly.
claim.
Yep.
So it's just, we're all in this bucket. And, it's funny, I'm about to do my own LinkedIn story about my own self. I am on a high deductible health plan and I just
Right.
got the estimate from the hospital for my son who has a heart condition of, $6,000 out of pocket. And I am going to negotiate that and tell the story of how you can do it even when you are on a high deductible health plan that is a corporate plan. And
Mhm.
so it's really just so to bring this home and be cognizant of our listeners' time and, try to give some nuggets. I think that we are in a world where everything is so complex. And I think employers are trying so hard to figure out how to get one step ahead, and it all starts with the contract and it all starts with really understanding how you're buying this. And that's why I really, I will not hide around the fact I'm very passionate about a company called Brightwise. What they're doing is they're putting risk management to the spend. I would love to see us get to a world where it doesn't matter what the contract says, because at
Right.
the end of the day, we should be focused on the price and it can't exceed that price. And if it
Exactly.
does, somebody else has to be on the hook for it because they're the ones who should be managing these plans. And that's
Right.
what I'll end with.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a great point, and that's something, as you said, people in our industry don't always know. They don't always know what that is or how to control it. We've spent so many years just trying to control the health spend, but as the PBM spend has increased and we have found more and more shell games and differentials. There was and I've talked about this before, a state senator in Oklahoma in 1955. His name was Mike Monroney. Have you ever heard of him?
And where was he out of?
Oklahoma.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
So the reason I mention him is because I quote, what he did a lot in 1955. Prior to 55, you could go from one car dealer to another, buy the exact car for a huge difference in price. The legislation that he passed is that they're called Monroney stickers, but it's that MSRP sticker that goes on every new car. Okay. So as a result of this legislation, they were now required to put these stickers on. So you know where the starting point. And I've always said, we need Monroney stickers for healthcare, for drugs, for procedures, so that it's transparent, like Mark Cuban does, where he said, look, here's what it cost me. I add
And here's what I'm marking
50%.
it up to make. Yes.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Well, Rachel, I think we have enough sort of to talk about still for another episode if you'd like to
I'd love to
rejoin.
come back. Absolutely. Absolutely, I come back.
Okay, excellent. So, anyway, thanks for cutting through the noise for employers and brokers trying to decode the PBM world. So, if they want to learn more about you or reach out, how can they reach you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Rachel Strauss. My website is RachelMStrauss.com. Forgive my clouded head today. Or you can email Rachel at RachelMStrauss.com.
Okay, excellent. So, to our listeners, if today's conversation helped you to see the pharmacy benefits a little bit differently, share this episode with your CFO or your benefits team. You can catch all of our episodes at benefitwhisperer.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So, until next time, I am Ralph Weber. And if you want to find out more, you can visit fixmybenefitsnow.com or call us at 832-243330. I'm Ralph Weber, and this has been another episode of the Benefit Whisperer. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Ralph.